Welcome to Conversation on Value, a podcast on Traces and Dreams about reframing value in business and society. I'm your host, Valeria Maltoni. In this episode, we'll explore the value in rituals with independent qualitative researcher Jonathan Cook. Conversation on Value is a podcast about how to reframe value in business and society. I'm Valeria, and I've been working on the question of value for more than 20 years. Welcome, Jonathan. I am excited to have you here. And I actually would love to start with the question of what is the value in rituals?
That's a great question, because it is not as simple and direct as we might suspect if we were to take a look at the way that value is calculated in business culture, conventional business culture. Value in ritual is what you can convince people it is. And ritual is, in essence, a system of symbolic organized behavior that is designed to get you to feel as if something matters, even though objectively it might be either really a very low value or even of negative value, or it might be something that's otherwise viewed as a commodity. I want to give an example from a piece of excellent research done by a team led by Kathleen Vose and Francisca Gino. A few years ago, they took a chocolate bar and they had an experimental group and a control group. Just a chocolate bar, standard. Think Hershey's chocolate. Probably not great stuff, but it's chocolate. Everybody likes it. They were identical is the point. And the experimental group was given a small ritual to do with it. Now, this was not a traditional ritual. It wasn't embodied in culture, like a great church tradition or anything like that, okay? It's just a series of instructions about a particular way that you have to open up the wrapper and then break the chocolate bar before you eat it. And in the control group, they were simply told, wait 90 seconds and then eat the chocolate bar. And the people in the experimental group gave a higher financial value to the chocolate when asked what they would pay for it. It was something like 70% higher. If you think about value there, the calculation, that difference is remarkable. And thinking about this practically in business, it doesn't create a lot of effort to design something like that. But what essentially is happening is that you are convincing people that this object and this experience is something that is worth paying attention to. It is worth investing in, whether that's money, time, or could be word of mouth. You're talking about it, building a culture around it. Is it worth it or not? And so when you have a ritual, you are assigning value to this thing. Now, we don't just do this willy-nilly. Rituals have purpose in our individual lives and for society. They help us to agree upon things that matter and to invest our collective effort in those things, to give them value and to come together by doing that. But it is something that can happen with practically anything at all. And if we think about the kinds of things that we invest in value to disagree about, that's especially so. And we're getting very good at disagreeing with each other about things these days.
Yes, we are. In some of your work, you've talked about ritual as different kinds of rituals, and how a ritual can become a sort of place of play. Can you expand a little bit more on those concepts?
I would love to. And this actually relates to economy as well. because ritual is about defining spaces and what we do in those spaces. You can think about this in terms of the metaphor of a house. The fact is, most people have in their homes 2 rooms with sink where water comes out and drains out, and soap in both the kitchen and the bathroom. But most people would never, ever wash their dishes in the bathroom sink unless there were some kind of emergency where you just had to do it. And there are other things that you do in the bathroom you would never do in the kitchen sink, even though you could, and you could clean up after it. It's not about functional difference. It's about knowing that there are times and places to do things. And so Johann Huizinga, a great author, persecuted by the Nazis. Originally, he was an art historian, but he also is a pioneering game theorist. He talked about this in the book Homo Ludens, which means, instead of Homo sapiens, the thinking person, it's Homo Ludens, as in we play. That's what makes us human. And he said, everything is a game. Everything is a game. For example, when you go to court and you have to stand before the judge and you have the lawyers doing their thing, it's a game. There's a lot at stake, but it's a game, which means that there are different rules inside the sphere of the game. Here in the United States, there's this thing that children used to do. They used to play marbles. I don't know if they did that where you grew up, but you draw a chalk circle on the pavement, and then you have to knock marbles of different colors in and out. But the thing is that with this chalk line in that circle, the rules outside of that circle are different than they are inside the circle. And so what a ritual does, if it's well designed, is to create that kind of circle of a different experience. And that's a special place because things can happen in there that cannot happen elsewhere. And those things can change who we are. And thus we get rites of passage. And those are really special things. And one of those rites of passage that we go through all the time is the ritual of ownership that we go into when we walk into a store. A store, we take it for granted. We think it's just a place of function. We go shopping, we pay the money. No, this is a ritual of transformation in the objects and in ourselves. Because if you think about what you do in the store, if you did that somewhere else, you would be thrown in jail for being a thief. Why is it possible that in the store you can pick up things, put them in a cart, and walk away with them? It's because you're engaging in a sacrifice at the checkout counter of value in your coin. I know we think, oh, coin, oh, money, it's the root of all evil and all of that, but there's much more to it than that. These are little tokens of value. Think of what a euro represents. It represents time from your life that you have sacrificed, that you will never get back. The effort, the creativity, whatever you put into that work, sometimes physical pain goes into that work, and you get a euro for that. And then that can become transformed again into a piece of bread. So your time becomes a coin, which becomes a piece of bread. If we had someone from outside of our culture looking at that, they would say, you guys are nuts. These people are so flamboyant. They're engaging in rituals all the time. We don't see them that way because we're inside of it. And to us, it's just ordinary. But we're doing remarkable, magical, transformative things with ritual and value all the time.
It's interesting when you talked about walking into a store, I immediately thought, oh, retail therapy. That's why we call it retail therapy, because we go in and we start imagining ourselves, I guess, into different outfits or different objects, and our association with them changes based on our story.
Absolutely. Even if you don't buy them, this is a place of fantasy. And you can put on this outfit in the changing room and think to yourself, could I become this person? If I wear this, I could go to these events and I could act like this and enter society as a new person, that you couldn't if you were just wearing blue jeans and an old t-shirt, which, you could say is superficial, that we discount the value of people based on what they wear. But on the other hand, it means that we're constantly playing with costumes. And of course, it's not just clothes, it's the objects that we carry with us or choose not to carry, and what we do with that. We're making these statements of identity all the time. And if we begin to think about this in terms of ritual, we can start to do what so many young people are doing these days, which is to look at identity as something fluid. You are not just one person. You are actually many different people within you, and you get to choose when to display one aspect of your identity or another.
So that's interesting, because I go back to business as you're talking about that, and I think about that circle as the company and the organization and what happens inside these walls. And now, how do I reconcile this conversation around different identities with the roles that companies assign to people when they walk inside the circle?
Oh, that is a great question. I mean, you have a lot of companies that are doing not very helpful things, I would say, when it comes to identity. Like Elon Musk at Tesla, he wants those workers to come in and live there and sleep there and just sacrifice the rest of their identities and just push, work, work, work. And we know very functionally that people don't work well that way, which is why a 4-day work week actually is more productive than a 5-day work week, because we're not machines. We don't just function. You can't just turn the crank and it works better and better. We as human beings, we give our best work when we are stimulated in many different ways, when we go out into green space, when we do this thing called vacation, which interestingly in Britain is called a holiday, which suggests there's something very sacred to it, which it is. It's another one of those circles. It's a space where you say, I get to do things that replenish me. I vacate all of the stuff that my work tries to put onto me, and I become more valuable, and I bring that back to work, and I do better things because of it, because I'm not just working in a straight line. I've got all these rich associations now because I have a complete life. Facebook is another one where, or Meta, I should say, they have not completely owned that identity yet. But they tried to force their users to have one true identity. And you see that happening again with Twitter and Meta trying to have the verified identities. But really, a lot of people want to have multiple accounts. And we also want to do that in our professional lives. Yes, I will work at this company, but I will also have a side hustle over here. And traditionally, a lot of companies look down on that. But that's the direction our economy is going, much more fluid, recognizing our multiplicity within.
So do you feel that organizations still staying inside that company circle, that organizations are missing out on pieces of or parts of people that could contribute enhanced ways to the work by sticking them into labels and roles and sort of narrowing their scope inside that, for lack of a better term, space or playground?
Oh, this is absolutely the case. And we see this in organizations that still look at a person's identity that they were born with in terms of gender or ethnicity, or they'll look at where they went to school. You know, even if they're someone my age in their 50s, you know, where I went to college is maybe not the most relevant thing anymore. But why is it that colleges and universities are supposed to do so much of that work? How come in a company you can't go through a series of rituals of transformation where you attain new roles, new powers, and new abilities? That would be an amazing thing. And the companies are really profiting when that happens, when they don't just take someone and say, hey, you've got this status, this is what you can do. If you're working at Amazon, you're just the sort of person who can work in a warehouse and act like a robot. all of those people in there are capable of so much more. They could be giving more to the company as well as taking more themselves.
I was listening to an interview with Andrea Pontremoli, who is the CEO or the AD in Italian of Dallara, the indie company. And he was talking about when he was at IBM back in the day. He was a young man, and IBM used to be the company that created a lot of opportunity for their employees. And he was identified early on as a high potential individual. He went in as an engineer, but he came out a well-rounded manager. They sent him to school. They sent him to school in the US. They sent him to school in different places to pick up pieces of sociology and psychology and all of these different disciplines to become accounting, finance, to become a well-rounded manager. And I don't know how many can talk about their experience in an organization that way anymore. It feels like there is so much missed opportunity, and how can we help organizations realize the value of those kinds of attitudes towards people?
Well, that's a great question. Ooh, can we do that? So, in the last few weeks, we have been experiencing a lot of seismic activity in the global economy, especially when it comes to technology companies. But though it's spreading to other areas, they are firing people in the tens of thousands. And if you think about what we were all told maybe 10 years ago, we were told that the future is in computer science, and we should teach our children to code because that's where the future is. Only now we have artificial intelligence systems that are sort of like ChatGPT, and they can do coding. And why would these companies hire a human being when they can just have a system do it automatically? And that's happening in a lot of different areas. And the thing that has to be communicated if we're going to convince business leaders to take this seriously is that a human being has a lot more value than just being a coder. And when we teach people to do literal tasks and we make that the center of their education, we make them into small things. We make them into imitations of machines. And machines will always be better than imitations of machines. Now we see with ChatGPT that machines are being used to try to imitate humans. But if you've been on there, it's a pale imitation of what a human being can offer. I mean, first of all, it's often wrong, but it doesn't get into the depth of an idea in the way that a human being can. And we're at this point in history where we have to decide, what is this all for? What do we have these giant corporations for? What is business about? What is value for? Is it about getting the accumulation of value for a small number of people so that they can control more and more? Or is it about what we're going to do as a species, as a world, and preserving our living, natural human existence here? I would like to think that there are enough people who understand the value of the human species continuing to flourish on the whole. But we have some serious choices to make, and it's not just the business leaders. We have to keep that in mind. It's really easy to say, Elon Musk is a bad guy, but we have choices to make in what we buy and what we pay attention to in the online economy of information and ideas, because corporations are manifestations. They are incorporations of our collective hungers and appetites. And when we seek shortcuts by creating art through artificial intelligence or by buying objects or services from companies that we know abuse people, we are making that dystopian reality closer, and we can make other choices.
Yeah, you wrote recently you actually asked a question, and I would like us to entertain it, of what happens when our cultural beliefs are no longer matching our social structure, and the dissonance that happens between the stories we tell and the reality that we need to face.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And it's very disorienting. Disorientation is part of the ritual process. And it allows us to tell stories that have an impact on us, that really change us. When you have art inside of a ritual sphere, wow, it reaches you when you're psychologically open, and it can change who you are and how you look at the world. Of course, in the last 2 or 3 years with the pandemic, we have gone through a disorientation and a separation that is like a ritual experience, but without any sense of shared purpose. You know, early on, you remember in Italy, we had the people singing across the balconies to each other. That lasted a couple of weeks, and then everybody went inside and they shut themselves off. And so many people are still doing that. The social engines of togetherness are not yet up and fully operational again. So many young people are not going back to school. They're not getting into romantic relationships anymore. And that's, you know, if that's what they want to do, that's fine. I don't mean to push that. And if people should always have the opportunity for solitude. But we lost a lot of social connection. And so here in the United States, we have seen how much our own culture has fractured because the stories we tell about ourselves happen in different areas, different chambers. And so we believe radically different things about what it means to be an American. And the same thing, of course, can happen in a company. You know, when you see so many of the people at Google protesting against their leadership, and they have very different ideas, they tell different stories. The workers are still holding on to the idea that you shouldn't be evil. And, you know, the management kind of squints and says, well, who can say what's evil? You know, so yeah, I mean, of course, we don't want everyone to come together in perfect harmony, and we should have diversity, and we should tell different stories because we're different people. But if we're going to have a society, we also have to have a way for those stories to talk to each other so that we still have connections.
So, one of the things that I would like to explore with you is the role of systems or structures to create experiences. In rituals, you've written and talked about the role of the guide. And we're speaking about the chat GPT. I was thinking, all right, so we are making everything the most efficient possible. I was just reading recently how they're trying to create shoots or itineraries for our galleries so that they can channel people like, you know, cattle, like, you know, we don't have enough of those experiences at airports. And you know, kind of creating this kind of structure and organization. And I'm feeling that we might be missing the point around the structure that we can create to unleash imagination and opportunity versus the structure that creates efficiency and optimizes certain aspects of the experience. Can you address the nuance or the differences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you know, an easy answer is often not an answer that's worth having. And when I think about Chat GPT, I think about a person who wants to go on a ritual experience, a vision quest of transformation, but they end up alone in a canyon and they're shouting out questions, and all they get back is an echo. And that's what Chat GPT is, which is very efficient. There's no one there who has to work on helping that person, but they're not really going to get anything new out of it. Efficiency is one of those things that we think we want because it gets us to where we want to go. But when we get to where we want to go, we do that in a straight line. We never understood anything that we didn't know before. And that's why my favorite punctuation mark is the question mark, because it takes us to places we don't anticipate. Nobody knows where the punctuation marks came from. You know, there are different theories that historians have, but the information is lacking. But if you take a look at their shape, they tell you stories in the shape. The period is what it is, and that's it. That's all it does. The comma has a little bit of a dip, and it allows for maybe a little bit more information. The exclamation mark starts at a point and then shoots off from there. But the question mark is amazing because it starts out at a known point, one little point. And then where does it go? It doesn't go straight to the destination, which is the efficient thing to do. Like an exclamation mark, you go straight to the destination. You say, I have this, therefore I know that. And you learn nothing. You've gone nowhere that you didn't know you could go. But if you go with a question mark, oh my gosh, it curves around. And the act of asking a question is this, it's this place of vulnerability. A question is a ritual in language of admitting that you don't know, but you want to know. You want to become somebody who knows something they didn't know before. And that's why a question is a quest. It is a ritual. It's a way of opening yourself up. And the more that we ask big, open questions, that's the more we can learn. And it also means you're going to get a lot of things you didn't really want to know that may not be immediately useful. And it's very inefficient, a question, but it opens up new things. Efficiency closes down so many possibilities for new things.
So how do we organize or curate spaces and experiences with more questions than periods?
Yeah. Well, you know, we have to invest in these spaces, which means we have to allow people to not be immediately productive. We have to allow for obliquity. We have to trust that people actually, when they are given what they need, the basics in life, and they are allowed to feel safe and healthy, that they can't stop producing things. I mean, we're insane monkeys that just do nuts kinds of things, crazy things with the natural world around us. We make things, we can't stop it because we're curious naturally. So we have to allow spaces for people to just encounter each other and encounter the world and ask questions. It's why in science you have basic science. It's really important. And inevitably there are people who say, well, why are we bothering to do this research? It doesn't help the economy at all. But the most important, most economically valuable technology that we have could not have been invented without that kind of basic science. We need that in our culture as well. And that has to be there in the business. You can't just have people being efficient and optimized. If you do, it goes nowhere.
So we miss innovation, we miss what? Creating new experiences.
Well, we don't know what we miss. That's the tragic thing. You know, it's like, what if Vincent van Gogh was just taught to be an accountant? Accountants are fine people and we need them. But if he never picked up a paintbrush, we wouldn't have known that we were missing the Starry Night. And so many other things that have come from that. And maybe he would have lived a long life and not cut his ear off. That's true. I want to allow for that. But we don't know what we'll miss. Innovation is one of them. I'm currently writing an article on the idea that you could use these large language model artificial intelligence systems for doing branding research. And it certainly can get all of the predictable associations with the brand. But these are systems that work on what is predictable. And in predictability, there is no opportunity. Opportunist means you open up a port, you open up a doorway through which you can travel, where before it was all blocked off and you could not go before. You can go to new places. If you don't have a questioning system that can allow for new things to appear and you respond to them spontaneously, all you get is a predictable life, and you get only what you had before, which is not only depressing, it's also, we've learned, toxic for the world that we live in. And we can't survive unless we have new ways of living as human beings.
So I want to go back to something you said about the mass layoffs and the manner. I would like to focus on the manner in which they were conducted. A while back, I did an exploration. I did a lot of brand strategy. And part of that exploration was what happens when a brand dies. And because death is part of the human experience. And it's also part of, brands are embedded with meaning. And that's why they work and they resonate. But do we address, the death of a brand, and in this case, the death of these jobs and these roles and these, with put ramifications, but also what happens to the people who are there, who remain, after such an experience? How can rituals help us in these fragments?
We, in our culture, and I'm speaking globally, in the global culture that has emerged, are so bad at talking about death. So many of our problems are because we are afraid of death. I'm currently doing a project for a natural cemetery where they bury people without any embalming, no elaborate coffins, none of that stuff. And it is, here in the United States, an extremely radical idea, because how could you just let a person rot? And yet this is the only true thing that we know about life, is that it ends for absolutely everybody in death. And the people in Silicon Valley who think that they're going to somehow upload their minds into a computer, well, that hasn't happened and it's not going to happen. And if you did, it wouldn't be you. So let's get real about this. You're going to die, which means you're going to fail. Failure is also absolutely a universal experience, and we do not value it in business because we value this false identity of the leader, of the success, because people want to have easy money instead of having a system that actually nourishes people as they go through difficult times. When we separate people into winners and losers, we do that not just winning companies and winning businesses and losing ones, but also the people in those companies. And, I think most people have experienced with the pandemic that we should all recognize that we are weak at times. And that's not a flaw. It's actually part of the design of what we are, which is living beings, animals. Biological beings are crafted with our genetics to compete and then fail and die so that we can make room for other beings like ourselves to compete and fail and die. And the question is not success and what you're going to achieve as a final thing, and there's a great celebration of you, but it's about style points on the way down to failure and death. What are you able to do on the way? Are you able to make a baby? Are you able to make a great idea that people remember and repeat after you're gone? So I really want us to value that failure is an important thing in life, but it's also important not just in terms of death, which is final, and we do have rituals for that, like funerals, where we try to come to grips with that. But we also have little deaths in our lives, like when we lose a job or when a company closes down. And while there's something that's not alive anymore and it's not working, but we have the opportunity to take the failed company, to take the people who have lost their jobs and to give them new jobs, to give the space for another company if we are honest and have the guts to say this failed. You know, how might it have been different at Theranos if Elizabeth Holmes had been, and her associated people had been willing to say, hey, this is not working out for now. It's an interesting idea and we should give it space, but we need time. Instead, we know what happened. The pressures, it wasn't just Elizabeth Holmes being dishonest. It was those investors who said, I need to have a hockey stick of revenue going up, and I need that within 9 months. And if you can't give me that, the money's going elsewhere. I look at tech publications, digital technology, like say TechCrunch or Wired. And for far too long, they celebrated the startup, the new company that was going to do amazing things. And it supported this culture of empty boasting where people said they were going to do amazing things and they had no idea how they were going to do it. But the digital technology, the tech journalists never reported that part of it. They never wrote the articles about those startups that failed and why they failed and how they failed and what we could learn from that. I think we need to be more embracing of that, of old age and decline and death, and make it be okay and take care of the people and communities on the way down.
So in a way, I feel like the stories are not matching with real life, and whether we do it on purpose or we do it for some way of trying to defy death, this is the disconnect that is happening. That this is what I'm hearing you say.
Take a look at that filter on TikTok. Do you know the one I'm talking about? Where
No.
if we were on TikTok right now, I mean, look at me. Okay, I'm in my 50s. I have wrinkles. I have bags. I have gray hair. It's a real thing. But if I were using that TikTok filter, it would not only make my face smooth and ageless, but it would give me makeup and it would make my jaw square. And oh, I would be so handsome, and it would be a complete fraud. And that's become really controversial because I think a lot of people feel very pressured to keep up with that image. You know, like the influencers on Instagram who always are looking beautiful and their children are always well behaved. But you find out that behind the scenes, the mother is slapping the child and the husband is having an affair. And this was all a rental villa that they didn't pay for completely. The story is a fraud. And we need to give space for real people. And then when we do, we can start to grow them in real ways, and they will be beautiful, just not like that.
Somehow I find it when I look into culture or into people, especially the things that they feel are defects, I feel that they are the things that make them unique and make them lovable and enduring in unique ways. So I don't know if that bears with the type of qualitative research that an exploration that you do.
It can. When things are working well, it does. But there are a lot of people out there who are hurting. And I don't think that we make space for them because we don't like to think about what can happen to us. And we value the smooth and the fresh and the young, so full of potential. And, you know, young people are lovely. I have kids, so I don't want to put down young people at all, but they're not going to stay that way. And accidents happen to people. People have tragedies, and people also make terrible mistakes, and sometimes they do terrible things to other people. But when we don't have a system that can forgive those people and give them a path forward, they move into even more destructive patterns, self-destructive or destructive towards others. So I agree with you that we need to see these flaws as something special. I mean, if you think about it in terms of value and branding, often it's the flaws and the idiosyncrasies that really make a company special. It makes them relatable and kind of quirky, and we feel like we can actually have a connection there. That matters.
Anything about rituals that I haven't asked you, and I should have, because it's important?
Well, I would like to offer up this idea. First, I want to recommend everybody go out and read a book that is recently published by a brilliant guy who is not myself. His name is Dimitri Xygalatas, Xygalatas. And the book has the simple title, Ritual. And he really does a lot of great work. He doesn't cover everything, nobody ever does, but it has a lot of fascinating material. And one of the things that he has studied as an anthropologist doing psychological experiments has been to see that when we get outside of this idea that we want convenience and comfort and we want maximum value in our economies, we get to something really special. He took a look at what people do in relationship to this Hindu ritual called Taipusam. And there are different ways you can engage with that. You can stand by the side of the road and watch other people participate, or you can walk on fire or swords, or you can pierce your cheeks with these metal skewers and then put citrus fruits on, and the juices come in and they sting, or you can put hooks into the back of, in the skin, and you drag these things along the road. Okay, so if we take a look at the way that conventional business culture looks at value, they would say, well, that's not what people want, so we're not going to give them that. They want to be comfortable and they want to have things happen efficiently. None of that is efficient. None of that is comfortable. But who is happiest at the end of the ritual? It's not the person who stands by on the side of the road and says, well, thank goodness that's not me. No, the people who reported the most happiness were the people who were suffering the most. And furthermore, the people who made the most financial donations to the local temple were those who suffered the most, because that was a ritual of sacrifice and investment. It's saying this thing that we're doing, this festival that we have, it matters. It matters so much. I'm going to stab myself through the face. It's that great. Come on. This is why people get tattoos, that kind of look ugly and faded 25 years later, but boy, they remember the time and the place, and it was worth something. What are you willing to suffer for? Now, this can be abusive, and we have lots of examples of, say, religious organizations that have very solid ritual structures. And then they get people to feel that way, and then they really make them suffer. So when I'm talking about using ritual, when we have powerful organizations using it, we also need to have strong communities to make sure that these things are pro-social, because this can be a very, very dangerous thing. But that's precisely because it's so powerful. So I'm not suggesting that you all go stab yourselves and cut yourselves up and walk on fire right now. Do it within the structure of ritual and give it meaning. It's like a fire. If you just set a fire any place, it burns things down. If you put it in an engine that's well designed, it can create amazing movement and prosperity and value.
As you were talking, I was thinking about the ritual of, in Italy, there are many local regional markets. And all throughout the year, food markets, but also markets of selling different things. And these are people sometimes who have stores, but they also have, they come with a little table and they put up their wares. And one thing that I've noticed is sometimes they will put things nicely folded in the front, ready to be picked up. And if you wanted to be an efficient buyer, you would just go by, pick up the items, if you like them, that are in the front, that are right there, and pay for them and just walk away. But instead, what I observe is that most people like to rummage through the pile of things that is at the back. to find that special item. And so they invested the time and effort into, which is irrational, isn't it? To an observant.
Everything important is irrational. I mean, the thing that you find in the back, that could be just something that you have. The thing at the front, anybody can have that. And you're a special person, aren't you? So come on.
So I feel that there is a missed opportunity in organizations, and perhaps the worst part of that is that we are giving to chatbots what could be the opportunity of a lifetime to discover what my customers are thinking about my service, to discover an opportunity to create a better profile. Let me give you an example. I buy Italian food from many different stores, and there is this one store, and they are run differently. The one store is very efficient. They have optimized carts, optimized sites, optimized experience, and stages in the process, and they have outsourced the customer service. And recently they had a gift. They included a gift with the food purchase that I made for International Women's Day. And so they sent me the gift, and I opened up, and it was a surprise gift. And the gift was lovely, except for it had nuts in one item, and it had apricots in the other. And I'm allergic to both nuts and stone fruit.
Oh my gosh.
And so what could have been a delight is instead something that now I need to give away because I can't eat it. So I contacted them, and I run these experiments all the time to understand how things could work. And I contacted them, and I expressed gratitude, and I also told them I have these allergies. Mm-hmm. And to note that I have a profile on the site that tracks all of my purchases, mm-hmm. and gives me rewards, right? So as a smart business person, what I do is I go back to that profile and I add these data points to my profile, so that whenever, if I give a surprise gift again, I will avoid those ingredients. But what happens with the outsourced customer service experience? A long canned email that says, we thank you so much, and there will be other gifts and other opportunities to, we have promos all the time.
Yeah, and that's what's the
what
point
a missed opportunity.
The thing that drives me crazy is when I get an email like that, and they want to try to express that they want to hear from me, and they tell me they have a 2-minute survey. It's only going to take 2 minutes of my time. And I'm supposed to be happy about that, because who wants to waste time? But what they're telling me is your opinion only matters worth 2 minutes. And furthermore, it's automated. So we don't even actually want to talk to you. We just want you to go click on a website for us, which is an insult. Why would you so constantly insult the people you want to give you money and be loyal to you? We do that all the time, don't we?
I compared it immediately with this other store, which is out in the Bronx. It's an Italian store, and they actually call you when they don't have an item. They don't send you an email, and I've talked to them. And so the way I pronounced their name, they said, "Oh, you're Italian." And so we spoke in Italian. And she said to me, well, we could do a substitute. And I said, no, I don't want the substitute because they have this specific ingredient. And they said, oh, I'll make a note of that. Mm-hmm. This is all manual, right? It's not very efficient. But I know that if I want to make a big purchase, I will go to that store because I trust that they will take care of me.
Yeah. And you also know you're not going to get angry at them in the same way that you do with a company that doesn't even seem to be listening, so you're going to forgive them and have an ongoing relationship, which I'm sure will have ups and downs, but the relationship can keep going. with that. I think we need more of that. And yes, things like Chat GPT are threatening to go in the other direction, but I think they show us by contrast what we do value and what is important for human beings and human relationships to offer in the business world.
Yeah, I feel that along with more questions, we're missing the whole listening piece, which is where we listening and observing, which is where we learn the most.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Listening is not just what we do with the ears, hearing sounds. It's this demonstration that we care enough to be present and not to speak, but to pay attention to somebody else and what they're doing as if it's important. And it usually is if you listen for long enough.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jonathan. I look forward to your future explorations. And you were telling me that you have a podcast that you're launching. So I will look out for that. And listeners at home, I would like to encourage you to make sure that you have a think on value of humanity in commerce, because it's important.
Thank you very much. It's been great to be here. And I love your stimulating questions.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, everyone. You've been listening and watching Conversation on Value. I'm your host, Valeria Maltoni. I hope you'll join us again for our next conversation on Traces and Dreams.